You're looking at a human, not a modern one, but the closest kind to ever walk beside us. Neanderthals, an ancient branch of humanity, once roamed this very earth. They hunted, loved, suffered, and eventually went extinct, but not completely, because a part of them still lives inside you. If you're not of African descent, then 1 to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. Not an archaeological relic, not a fossil, but a living genetic memory embedded deep in your blood, your cells, your genes. They lived between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago across snow-covered mountains and frozen forests, where every step was a dance with death, a time of colossal beasts, dark skies, and cold that cut through flesh. That's where Neanderthals endured, not because of luck, but because they were born to fight. And today, though they are long gone, their story still echoes within our bodies, in every heartbeat, every breath, and every primal instinct. This wasn't just an extinct species. They were our biological siblings who survived, who loved, and who left a permanent mark on the very fabric of humanity. Part 2. A physique beyond human. Forget everything you think you know about the modern human body. Neanderthals weren't people by today's standards. They were living biological machines. Neanderthal males weighed an average of 83 kilograms, females around 66. No fat, no excess weight. Every gram of that mass was dense muscle and bones built like steel. Their skeletal structure was entirely different from ours. Thick shoulders, powerful thighs, arms like a bear's, knees built to take punishment. Their bone density was nearly double that of modern humans, especially in the areas that bore the most strain. They didn't lift weights. They had no gyms, but their bodies developed as if they'd been trained by nature's toughest boot camp, right from birth. Not to look good, but to survive. Every step was a climb, every meal a battle. Neanderthals didn't jog to burn calories. They burned life itself to earn every bite of meat. They weren't bodybuilders. They were primal hunters, crafted by evolution into walking weapons. Their bodies weren't ornamental. They were tactical, efficient, built for war with the wild. And what shocks scientists most, when compared to Homo sapiens living in Europe 20,000 years ago, Neanderthals weren't shorter. In fact, they may have been slightly taller. But height wasn't the real advantage. What truly set them apart was how they used every ounce of muscle, every joint, every movement with lethal precision. They weren't just strong. They were the embodiment of survival in the form of a human. Part 3. Hunting in a world of giants. You think today's wilderness is harsh? Now imagine living in a world where everything around you was a real-life monster. Woolly mammoths, as big as buses. Woolly rhinos, strong enough to slam down entire trees. Giant wild horses, fast as the wind, kicking like sledgehammers. And the Neanderthal, armed with nothing but a wooden spear, had to bring them down, or starve. Their main weapon? No bows, no sophisticated traps, just heavy spears designed for close combat. One wrong throw, and the roles of hunter and prey could switch instantly. The skin of a forest elephant was as thick as armor. The fact that a hand-thrown spear could pierce it means Neanderthal arm strength rivaled that of a modern ballistic weapon. Without extraordinary muscle power, they couldn't have done it. And more importantly, no one survived if the hunt failed. In the brutal cold, a single week without meat could mean death for the entire group. Part 4. Hormones, muscle, and superhuman endurance. Being strong wasn't enough to survive the Ice Age. You had to be absurdly resilient. A Neanderthal could carry 27 kilograms of meat on their back and walk nearly 50 kilometers through snow, forests, and cutting winds. No sled, no shock-absorbing boots, just bone, muscle, and the will to survive. Where did that strength come from? Part of it came from testosterone, a hormone that doesn't just build muscle, but also boosts pain tolerance and speeds up recovery. Another part came from their anatomy. Broad shoulders, powerful thighs, and deep chests seemingly engineered to drag carcasses through the wild. But the true secret? Something Homo sapiens never developed, a body built to break and keep moving anyway. According to archaeological studies, 79 to 94% of Neanderthals bore at least one serious injury. Broken ribs, deformed arms, fractured vertebrae. Some even lost limbs entirely, but they didn't fall behind. They healed and went back into the wild. Because if they stopped, they'd die. And if they died, their group died with them. To put it in perspective, a male Neanderthal could bench press 200 kilograms without ever setting foot in a gym. Females, around 160 kilograms, stronger than the average modern-day bodybuilder. No supplements, no workout plans, no personal trainers, just nature itself and a genetic blueprint forged in blood, cold, and survival. They didn't just survive injuries, they turned pain into instinct and evolved into a symbol of biological endurance the world has never seen again. Part 5. A body evolved for extreme cold. The world Neanderthals lived in wasn't just cold, it was frozen to the point where one wrong breath could kill. Winds sliced like blades. Air was dry as dust. One gasp too deep and it could be your last. But Neanderthals didn't just survive it, they thrived in it. Their lungs were 20 to 40% larger than ours. One male specimen, Kavara II, had a lung capacity of up to 9 liters. That's more than elite Olympic swimmers today. But large lungs alone weren't enough. They had a secret weapon, the nose. Neanderthal noses were massive, wide, deep, and built with a purpose, not to smell better, but to process deadly air. Freezing cold air was warmed and humidified before reaching the lungs. A built-in survival system, like a miniature furnace on the face. And that body? It didn't run on cruise control like ours. It burned energy like a northern predator in the dead of winter. Every day, a Neanderthal needed between 4,500 and 6,700 calories, double what a modern human consumes. Not because they were greedy, but because they were walking biological heaters. You feel full after 2 bowls of soup? They needed to eat an entire deer every single day just to maintain body temperature. They had no thermal jackets, no heated blankets. What they had were lungs like air pumps, noses like cold filters, and bodies hardened by snow, wind, and time. In the Ice Age, where most creatures trembled, they stood strong, because Neanderthals weren't just survivors, they were the final product of the harshest experiment in evolutionary history. Part 6. As fast as a predator's strike. Neanderthals didn't run marathons. They didn't need to chase prey across miles of terrain, because for them, a few seconds were enough to end it. Their bodies weren't built for endurance like modern long-distance runners. No thick Achilles tendons for efficient stride recoil. No long legs for stretching out steps. No energy-conserving mechanisms like Homo sapiens. But what they lacked in stamina, they made up for in explosive power. They had legs like coiled springs, wide toes for maximum ground contact, and muscle fibers tuned for instant activation. Neanderthals were ambush specialists. They didn't chase, they stalked in silence, waited for the moment, then launched like a biological missile. Their anatomy makes it clear. They had a high proportion of fast-twitch muscle fibers, the kind built for short, violent bursts of force. They didn't last long. They didn't conserve energy. But when they fired, they exploded. One full-force charge, one leap onto the side of a mammoth, one takedown of a wild horse, before it even knew it was being hunted. And when combined with the brute strength described earlier, every Neanderthal attack became a moment where nature itself held its breath. This wasn't Olympic speed. This was kill or be killed speed, the kind of speed where missing a single strike meant your entire group might go hungry. Neanderthals didn't run for sport, they ran to kill. And every charge they made was the deadliest blow in prehistoric warfare. Part 7. Giant Brain. evolutionary intelligence. Neanderthals had bigger brains than we do, much bigger. Male brains averaged 1,640 centimeters cubic. Females weren't far behind. In terms of volume, they outpaced modern humans. But bigger doesn't mean smarter. They didn't write poetry. They didn't draw maps. They didn't ponder philosophy. Instead, they used their brains in the most primal way possible, to survive. Their minds were tuned to the body and the senses, controlling arms to throw spears, balancing on ice-slick cliffs, reading the faintest tracks in the soil, smelling prey carried by the wind. This wasn't a brain built for dreams. It was a brain anchored to the frozen earth of the Ice Age. But don't mistake that for simplicity. They crafted tools, not crude objects, but well-made instruments. They shared food. They cared for the sick. That means social structure. And they painted, etched, left behind symbols, something that only happens when abstract thought is born. A creature ruled purely by instinct doesn't place flowers beside the dead. Only a mind that understands meaning does that. They didn't write poems, but they planned every hunt like a chess match. No strategy, no dinner, no plan. The entire group could die. If Homo sapiens used intelligence to create culture, Neanderthals used it to optimize every action, every choice between life and death. This was a brain that didn't write books, but could map an entire frozen forest in memory and know how to survive inside it. That's not the mind of a scholar. That's evolutionary intelligence, refined through blood, cold, and fire. Part 8. Vision in the dark. If you've ever felt afraid walking through a forest at night, remember, Neanderthals could see everything in it. Their eye sockets were up to 15% larger than ours, not for beauty, but for survival in absolute darkness. The occipital lobe, the part of the brain responsible for vision, was unusually developed. This allowed Neanderthals to detect fine details in low light, where Homo sapiens needed fire or froze in their tracks. When night fell, Neanderthals kept hunting. When snow clouded the moon and silence swallowed the forest, they could still follow a trail. They didn't need torches because they were the light in the darkness. But vision wasn't their only weapon. They also had a sense of smell sharper than modern humans. Brain regions related to olfaction were significantly larger. They could smell predators, prey, even the direction of the wind. And their teeth? Not just for chewing. Their front teeth were worn down horizontally, not from hard food, but because they were used like a third hand. Clenching hides while the hands skinned the animal, biting ropes to tie bundles, holding branches while chipping stone tools. Their heads were large, faces wide, jaws thick, not from overeating, but because they needed space for big eyes, sensitive noses, and multi-purpose teeth. Neanderthals didn't just use their heads to think. They used their entire face as a survival sensor. Not even today's machines can fully replicate that. But they did it with nothing more than evolution and the primal will to live. Part 9. Why they disappeared. Neanderthals didn't vanish because they were weak. They vanished because they were too unique. And in this world, being different sometimes comes with a price. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals ruled the cold. They survived with strength, evolutionary intelligence, and elite hunting skills. But then the world changed, and they couldn't change fast enough. Homo sapiens arrived, not stronger, but more adaptable, more numerous, more connected. Their tools were sharper. They could sew clothing. They communicated efficiently. They lived in larger groups with cooperation, organization, and society. And that's when things started to unravel. As Homo sapiens expanded, the Neanderthals' lifeline began to collapse. Mammoths, woolly rhinos, the creatures they depended on, vanished or migrated away. Then the Campiflagri supervolcano erupted. Ash blotted out the sun. Cold intensified. An artificial winter gripped the earth, and Neanderthals couldn't hold on. It got worse. They had no immunity to the diseases brought by Homo sapiens. No one knows what the illnesses were, only that Neanderthals began to die. With small, scattered populations, they began interbreeding. Genetic diversity plummeted. Their bodies weakened. Even their minds started to fade. There was no war, no grand battle, just a quiet replacement. One species slowly left behind by a changing world. Neanderthals didn't lose a fight. They lost to time, to change, to the future arriving too fast. And so, the last of the Ice Age warriors disappeared, silently. No funerals, no farewells, only bones, stone tools, and fragments of DNA still carried within us. Part 10. They never disappeared. Because they are us. Neanderthals went extinct, but they never truly disappeared. They no longer walk the earth, but they still live. In your blood, your cells, your genes, working quietly inside you, every single day. If you're not of African descent, at least 1 to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. Not a fossil in a museum, not a drawing in a textbook, but a living part of you, shaping your body, your instincts, and the way you survive. No, that DNA doesn't make you a superhero. You won't lift 500 kilos or leap across rooftops, but it may do quieter things, more enduring things, boost your immunity to ancient pathogens, make you more sensitive to cold, as if your body still remembers the Ice Age winds, help you process fat better, like your ancestors who endured winters without food. Science still debates how much these genes affect us, but one truth stands clear: Neanderthals live on in us, not as a forgotten species, but as biological memories carried through thousands of generations. They once lived, fought for every meal, cared for their injured, buried their dead with flowers, stared into firelight and drew on cave walls, as if they knew memory had to be preserved. And today, you, watching this video, are living proof of their existence. Every time we tell their story, they live again, not in our blood, but in the collective memory of humanity. We, Homo sapiens, like to think we're the only ones. But in the palm of your hand, in your dreams, in the silence of ancient forests, there's something older, wilder, and deeply familiar. That's Neanderthal. Not gone, but woven into who we are. So now what about us? Those who carry the legacy of Neanderthals. We no longer hunt mammoths. We no longer sleep in caves. But we're still fighting, every day, against pressure, loneliness, and a world that changes faster than we can keep up. Maybe what we need today isn't brute strength like our ancestors. Maybe we need resilience, connection, and the humility to remember where we come from. Neanderthals never wrote books, but they left behind a story, in fire, in bone, in DNA. And today, we continue telling it. If you believe the past can help us live better in the present, if you want to understand where humans came from and why we're the last ones standing, subscribe, turn on notifications, and don't miss a single story. Because sometimes, to understand who we are, we have to begin with those who seem to be forgotten. Neanderthals may be gone, but their memory endures, and you are the one carrying their fire forward.